Imagine sitting on one of the most beautiful beaches that you have ever seen. Sitting in the bright sunlight, enjoying everything that nature has to offer you, while wondering if you should get in the water because you're a little hot. But what lies beneath the water has you puzzled, and the fear slowly grows that keeps you away from getting in. Cape Cod is a beautiful place in Massachusetts, filled with many, many, many beaches. The national seashore contains 43,607 acres of sandy beaches, high coastal bluffs, rolling sand dunes, pine barrens, and fresh water. This goes from Chatham to Provincetown. It is a massive seashore that holds a lot of beauty and a lot of places for travelers and explorers alike to adventure. But we need to make sure that we're exploring these areas with respect and not fear. So what do we think now of these ancient predators that lurk beneath the calm waters? Hi, I'm Roxy, and this is Roxy's World Adventures podcast. I'm your humble host here, and today we are going to talk about sharks. And if you know what week it is this week, you will know that it is Shark Week. And therefore, I wanted to do this special episode because I have been in Cape Cod. I have seen a fin in the water, but I have not had the delight of being next to a shark. And I say that facetiously because I used to be completely terrified of sharks. I still don't like the idea of being in the water with them, but I respect that it's really not my turf. And we'll go into that later. But since it's Shark Week, I really wanted to give an informational episode on sharks, mainly in Cape Cod. And I wanted to give you a little history and debunk some myths that many people believe because of certain mainstream movies like Jaws, which honestly, I am a huge fan of that movie. It is a perfect film, but it also instilled fear into so many people that going into the ocean water is a risk, which is very true. I mean, you have to realize that everything that you do in life involves a risk. And whether or not fear controls you is your choice to decide. So we're going to get into the history of sharks. Sharks have dated back to before dinosaurs, okay? So we're talking about over 450 million years. In fact, there were tiny fossilized scales that were found in central Australia that dated back to 465 million years ago. How wild is that? So sharks have been around since way before and have outlasted the dinosaurs. Therefore, I feel like they have a much bigger resilience than most land creatures do. And they have the ability to be deep in the depths of the water to avoid whatever's going on the land, which is where most of the issues tend to happen. Not necessarily. Most of the extinctions have happened because of certain things that have happened on land. That does not exclude water animals because they were still affected. But sharks have just been around forever. From about 419 to 359, 60 million years ago, sharks really started emerging. So they were not what they look like today. They were actually relatively small. They were under 3 feet in size. They had really small teeth, but they were still apex predators. They still ate fish. They still hunted and were carnivores. And it's very, very different than what they appear today. Today, they're much bigger. Some of them are. Others are small. They vary in size, shape, some age, what their mouths look like, all of that. But that evolved from these tiny fossilized scales of very, very small sharks have evolved 450 million years ago. It's wild. So a little bit after that, so from about 359 to about 299, 300 million years ago, sharks underwent an evolutionary explosion. Now, this occurred after a massive extinction. So they survived this and then went through this explosive expansion of evolution. They started coming out with very weird shapes and different structures. There was a shark that had an anvil-shaped structure on its back. There was one that had like a buzzsaw of teeth on their lower jaw and their mouth. I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, dang, that's an interesting looking shark right there. But yeah, there were other really bizarre looking sharks with interesting shapes, and they continued to evolve. So in the Mesozoic era, which is while dinosaurs were roaming the earth, taking form, sharks evolved into what they look like today. And the best part about this is that they continue to exist after the extinction of dinosaurs. It is pretty wild. And during this time, rays and skates evolved off of the early sharks. So they are a subsection of shark, which is kind of cool. They're in the same family tree. Sharks ended up roaming the coastlines, which is where seals mostly hang out. The Wampanoag tribe, which they were the native tribe up in the New England area, and they frequented the coastline, and they had a massive respect for the sea in more ways than one, and they used the sea in a lot of their folklore, in their, their storytelling, in some of their cultural rituals, some traditional things that they do. They deeply wove it into their culture, and they used it as a source of food. They thought of it as a manifestation of sustainable harvesting. That was their livelihood, essentially. And I find it really cool, and I would love to go up there and participate in one of these water-based ceremonies and just see what they do with the sea and the wildlife during these ceremonies. I think it would be an intriguing thing to just be a part of. So that's on my list of things that I'm going to try to get involved in. But there were a lot of encounters early on with sharks. In the 1700s, actually, there was one fatal attack in the 1700s with a fisherman that happened. But the early fisherman stories, they basically made sharks out to be this pest. So they were the rodents of the sea. And essentially, I mean, they would go and steal their food. So they would go in, sometimes they'd bite off a line or something, or bite through any kind of netting that they had just to get their catch, which is smart on the shark's part. They're like, oh, this is a fisherman here. I guess he's just going to catch my meal for me today. So I mean, this happened a lot, enough that they were the pests of the sea. They attributed a lot of things to the sharks. So any kind of loss of gear, or they lost their catch or something like that, it was always a shark. And then one day a shark really did fatally attack somebody. But before then, they were getting more aggressive. Like if they didn't get the meal that they needed from the catch. So if the fishermen avoided the shark long enough to get the meal in their boat, the sharks would lurk and stalk the boats of the fishermen. So on their way back to shore, guess who's coming along behind you? Great white. You got a big shark looking for what's in your boat. Sometimes that was the fisherman. There's a rich marine ecosystem, and honestly, it's infuriating. But one infuriating myth is that apex predators, they cause issues for the ecosystem, and that is 100% wrong. Apex predators cause balance in an ecosystem, and to take away that balance causes issues throughout the entire ecosystem. So you'll get many more of one thing and it'll just take over, and soon enough you're going to have more and more issues because you don't have that apex predator to control the population. And not only that, but another myth that I'm about to debunk is that sharks do not have any predators. So no animals come after sharks. And that is 100% wrong. Actually, orca whales will crush a shark, and dolphins. For us humans that think they're all cute and stuff, they're out there killing sharks. Great whites. Just saying. So the great whites there was an issue with the seal population, and that is what sharks go after. Not humans. Sharks go after the seals, the bigger fish, everything like that. So they had an issue with the gray seal population up in Cape Cod. They ended up getting funding from the Marine Mammal Protection Act. That essentially protected seals from getting hunted, because that was what was happening. They were being hunted. That contributed to the gray seal recovery up in Cape Cod. And that is what brought back great white sharks and dusky sharks. Both of those came back because of this act. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you're introducing more of a balance to the ecosystem when you do something like that, which is honestly great. I feel like we probably should have done that a while ago, but sometimes these things take time. Sharks are very seasonal migrators, so they will spend the winters down south, just like birds. They basically follow the seals. So if the seals are still up in Massachusetts, the sharks are still going to be there. Once they start migrating south, the sharks will start migrating south. Generally speaking, sharks are only up in the Cape Cod area from June to December, and they're most active from, I believe, August to October. So that's just giving you a ballpark of when you're going to see the most sharks is from August to October. They started tagging sharks. So they wanted to do research on their migration patterns and just go into where some of these sharks will go, how far they'll go, their interactions close to shore, all of the above. So they're trying to get accurate data to forward to people because of the local population's fear of sharks. Not just the local population, I mean, a ton of people are afraid of sharks all throughout the country. Some people won't even go near the water because they're afraid a shark is going to come up on land. But they wanted to go into research and they debunked a lot of myths. Two of them I've already stated. Here are three more. One, sharks eat people. If anyone has seen Finding Nemo, you will know that humans are not food. Okay? So, I mean, they say fish are not food, but humans are not food. Sharks are curious. They will do a curiosity bite if they are curious enough about you. If you look enough like a seal, if you're wearing a wetsuit and you look enough like a seal, yeah, they will come and check you out and they might bite you. If you're flailing around in the water, yeah, they're probably going to think you're a seal trying to escape. And that triggers the response from them to go after you. But they will only just bite. They do not devour humans. They will not do that because we don't taste good to them. They don't like how we taste. They would rather eat a nice stinky fish or a group of them, depending on how big the shark is and how big the fish is. They would much rather eat that than us. So you don't really have to worry about that too much. Another myth, which is actually one of my favorites, a shark can smell a drop of blood from miles away. That is entirely false. Although sharks do have a really, really good sense of smell, but from miles away, a drop of blood is not going to do anything for them. Now, there are certain things that you may want to take into caution when you're thinking about doing certain things in the water. Like for us women, if you are on the first few days of your monthly bill, you may not want to go scuba diving. That might be a bad idea. However, generally speaking, it's not really that big of a deal. It just might not be the best plan, but you know, to each their own. Some people do it. Some people don't. Generally speaking, they can't. If you have a cut on your finger, they're not gonna know. They're not gonna come after you. And the last one is that sharks have to constantly swim to stay alive. That is false, but not for all sharks. Great whites are one of them, and mako sharks are another. There's a certain grouping of sharks that are in that family that to get oxygen in their lungs, they do have to constantly swim. So those are the sharks that will have to do that. But generally speaking, no. So tiger sharks, any of the little guys, whatever, they're not constantly swimming. They can relax. It could affect you in a situation where you're in an altercation with said shark. Sightings of sharks have increased over the past 70 years or so. And that's just because of this act and the fact that their food is becoming more abundant. So they're taking the opportunity to go after what they need to eat. There have been, so in Cape Cod, there's this stigma for some reason about sharks and the fact that sharks are always there. Sharks are always attacking people in Cape Cod and you shouldn't get on the water there. This was widespreadly caused by Jaws, which is hilarious. I love Jaws. I'm a horror movie nerd. Love me a good horror. And Jaws is just perfection. It is perfection. But Jaws single-handedly instilled the fear into millions of people around the world of sharks. And it's become this thing that reporters like to write about because, especially here in America, our media is based around fear. They like to scare us with different stories. And I don't know if that's because they get a reaction out of it or if people become more interested because they're afraid of it. I don't really know. But that's how our media works here. But there's this massive fear of going into the ocean. Now, I just want to shed some light on that. Basically, there have only been 15 documented attacks, which honestly isn't really an attack. Let's be honest here. It's more of a curiosity. It's more of a, I want to see what you taste like. And then they realize that they don't want to eat you and they leave. There's only been 15 in Cape Cod recorded. 15. 8 of them have happened after 2000. So there is a boom of the sharks coming into this area where their food is. There have only been 3 recorded fatalities. One I have already talked about, and that was a fisherman in the 1700s. I want to say it was like 1771 or something along those lines, but he never came back to shore. The next one since then was in 1936. So this is hundreds of years later. 1936, Joseph Troy was unfortunately fatally bitten in July. It was the end of July, and he was only 16 years old. He was swimming off the shore of Buzzards Bay, and he was bitten. They apparently tried to do multiple amputations of his leg. So they tried multiple times to amputate his leg. And this poor young boy passed away from blood loss. Unfortunately, his documented case became a story which led into the story of Jaws, which led into the film. And that's what happens when scary things like that happen. There was no recorded death after Joseph Troy until recently. The most recent fatal attack was in 2018. Poor Arthur Medici, he was boogie boarding off of Newcomb Hollow Beach. He was fatally bitten. He was only 26 years old, and he was able to make his way back to shore, unfortunately, shortly after he passed from his injuries. Believe it was also a loss of blood because it probably punctured an artery. He succumbed to his injuries on the beach. This sparked a huge response from the community, and it was very divided. So one side was all for seal culling and shark culling to reduce the presence of sharks. And then there was another side that said, why don't we just improve beach safety, trauma response, and get people to understand ecological balance? And I mean, because I'm doing this podcast, you guys know what side I'm on in this scenario. And it took a really long time for the government to decide. Like, nobody knew what they wanted, what the government wanted to happen. So grassroots organizations took matters into their own hands, and they raised money to install sonar technology and clever buoy warning systems at beaches. They also rapidly upgraded emergency networks. So they gave lifeguards radios, they improved warnings on the beaches to the public, and they also rose money to give education to the public about marine ecosystems, namely sharks, because people need to know what they can do to stay safe and really what helps make them feel less fear about spending the day on the beach or getting in the water. And that actually really helped the public get a little more closure with all the safety methods in place. And people were able to live with sharks on the shoreline. And they created these beach safety tips for people because now that they had the reputation that they had, they wanted to make sure that people knew the right ways to stay safe in the water. Number 1, always swim in groups. Number 2, avoid wildlife hotspots. So if you see schools of fish swimming around, guess where you shouldn't be swimming? Okay, stay in shallow water because you have more of a chance to be able to get away because you are on your legs and they can swim faster than you can, for sure. Avoid murky water. You want to be able to see, and even though you can't really see a lot of what's going on around you in the Atlantic, you still should avoid those murky areas because that's where sharks generally hang out to try to capture fish because they're not able to see them. And they're also not able to see you. So if they see something in the water, they're going to bite it. Limit splashing. That's just a no-brainer because splashing gives sharks the image of a seal because seals like to splash in the water. So you're basically just asking to be food if you're splashing around and have fun, but don't do it in a unsafe way. Heed all warnings. So make sure you know what the situation is when you get to the beach. You can do that by asking a lifeguard, looking at the signage. If there's a red flag up, don't go in the water. Just simple things. And always, 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 this should be a no-brainer for everyone that likes to adventure and travel. Be aware of your surroundings. Yes, you can still have fun as long as you are aware of what is going on around you. Don't go in the water drunk, please. That's just asking for problems all around. Respect the wildlife. If you see fish, hermit crabs, anything on the beach, just leave it alone. It's their habitat. You are the ones that are invading it. So just leave it be. Make sure that you coexist. So realize that the water is really their habitat, that's their place. You are the one invading it. So when people say shark-infested waters, it's actually very inaccurate. It's humans that are infecting the waters. And we don't really have to infect the waters, right? We can coexist, make things better for everyone involved. And I want to close by saying that nature does deserve our respect because we use it much more than we think we do. And we need to respect the areas that we recreate in and just understand it more. I hope that this episode really was able to give you some reflection on sharks and the fact that they're really not an immediate danger to us, even when we are in their habitat. You just have to be smart about it and realize that adventure begins with understanding. I want to thank you for joining me today. I would like to have a call of action for you to send me a story to my email. I would love for you to email me a good shark story that you have experienced. My email is roxysworldadventures@gmail.com. And if you want to send me the story, it might end up on the podcast. I would love to hear from you. And I hope that you will continue to listen to the show. And please follow Roxy's World Adventures for more stories where history, travel, healing, and the unexplained collide. Explore on.